Okay.
I
Good morning, everyone. My name is Thalia Brown, and I'm here with Maria. How do you pronounce your last name?
Tselevich.
Tselevich. We were both former McKinsey recruiters. She was actually a recruiting lead for firm service professionals, if that's correct. And I'm very excited to have her on the Authentic Discussion podcast, Think Gender. Today, we are unpacking recruiting strategies, how to continue the narrative, and how to focus on diversity in the wake of the end of affirmative action and diversity, equity, and inclusion programs as we know it. We will dive into Maria's strategies, career strategies on how to prep candidates as well as clients on how to hire fairly and to continue to keep the emphasis on doing the right thing. So, Maria, welcome to the Authentic Discussion, and we're excited to have you.
Thank you so much, Celia. I actually held a couple of different roles at McKinsey, and the reason why I landed on this particular topic of fairness is I was a recruiter for a while, and then I joined an internal team that McKinsey calls the firm assessment team.
Mm,
What the people on that team do is we have been creating and supporting the recruiting processes in terms of interviewing for a while, especially with the rise of the new types of roles that McKinsey started to hire for, like technical roles, data science roles, anything outside of consulting, but still client facing. And we were developing fair and structured interviewing processes for those teams globally. So it gave me a really cool lens to see what is happening um, across the globe
yeah,
in terms of hiring practices.
yeah, I can imagine. Um, I want to kind of pivot it towards more of US hiring, right? So we can talk about EMEA, we can talk about Asia, we can talk about global practices, but I really think for our conversation, it would be helpful to kind of talk through the landscape of what we're going through, right? I think in
Sure.
today's day and age, a lot of people were very comfortable with the idea of there was a diversity, equity, and inclusion organization that helped the company focus on hiring fairly as well as creating the methods in which to do so, whether it's through campus outreach, graduate outreach, or even going to uh, centers of excellence, ERGs, the um, formerly known as, where you can go to an external, maybe sometimes external or even internal part of the organization for all things. Where do I go? What do I do? And how do I make sure that I'm following the right guidelines? As we talk to and coach women, mainly of color and from all backgrounds, I'd love to dive into kind of what you've seen in the last 2 years, just at a bird's eye view. What do you think is helpful for women to understand? Obviously, you don't work at McKinsey anymore, so you don't want to necessarily represent them, but kind of consulting and at large, just sharing some insights that you think would be helpful for women.
So I would never, even working at a company, represent the opinions of a company as a whole. I think it's way above my pay grade.
Yeah, it's
But in terms of the development, it's really interesting. I am never the type of person to kind of drum up fear or anxiety. So I don't want to say that it's business as usual anywhere. We all know it's not. At the same time, I do want to mention that a lot of larger organizations like McKinsey, like Amazon that I worked for as well, like Microsoft, who has very transparent interviewing processes and so on, and many more that are not as shiny and attractive, have employed practices that, if not go specifically after candidates with diverse backgrounds, but at least even the playing field during the interviewing processes. And how it is done is through interviewing based on skills and very strict and specific criteria that would be implemented for every role that they're interviewing for, which means that if you meet the criteria, theoretically, you get hired for the roles. We, of course, cannot exclude the human factor there. If you happen to run across an interviewer that does not have their biases in check or very actively and consciously is not passing through candidates that do not look like them. But that has happened during the peak of the DEI teams as well, right? You can't control or you can't monitor every single interview you have, especially in large companies. But what I have seen from, if we're talking about coaching and women specifically, one of the things that I have seen with my clients is a lot of us have been taught that if we do our job well, we will get noticed. So keep your head down, keep working, keep doing it well. So we naturally, by the time we become successful adults, we naturally do not feel comfortable talking about our accomplishments in a way that a lot of men can. That and this is going to be mildly aggressive, I think, but there is a
Feel free to be as aggressive as you want to be, Maria, because
okay, but there is a wonderful clip of Jenna Ortega
hmm
and talking about preparing how to play cello in the Wednesday TV show.
hmm
And she doesn't play cello, the character of Wednesday does. And the musician that was working with her to make it um, somewhat realistic, she was asking, how do I make it look so that the people who do play cello just don't say, oh my God, what is she doing?
Yeah.
And the advice was, do it, you need to be doing it confidently. Think of a confidence of an average white man. And I think that oftentimes if we tell ourselves, of a think about the confidence of an average man, I should say, maybe.
Yeah.
And allow it to lift you up in the conversations that you're having, in the way that you talk about your achievements or your knowledge or skills or experience. That would be the snappiest, easiest advice I could give in terms of interviewing at this time.
Yeah. And I think that's really helpful. I have to share a personal story with you. And one of the things that I was really proud of was when I got into firm service professionals and I got to work for McKinsey because I used to be a contract recruiter for my first couple of years in Boston. And I remember meeting with an agency recruiter. And the first thing she said to me, and I think I was maybe 28, was like, you'll never get into McKinsey. She looked me up and down multiple times. She looked at my resume. I didn't have my suit at that point. I couldn't afford one. I was just in a shirt dress. I didn't have an executive portfolio. I was just, a regular girl coming out of either a university program or just a contract recruiting gig where I was just getting my feet firmly planted on the ground and learning about corporate America. And I think she killed my confidence with that one statement because that was my dream firm. Fast forward several years later, I met a few different recruiters at McKinsey that were like, "You're just what we're looking for, right?" And then I got the opportunity to work for the firm. And I think what really changed my mindset was sometimes you have these intermediary recruiters that end up honestly becoming roadblocks. They kill your confidence more so than the actual firm itself. And there's this I almost want to say a disillusion that women go through where they are talked down to, right? People kind of talk down to you because maybe, you don't fit the narrative or you don't fit the criteria that someone has envisioned for, well, this would be perfect for this firm. What advice, Maria, do you give women, specifically that women potentially of color who are looking to step into consulting and maybe have that fear that maybe I'm just not good enough, right? And that, again, it sounds so sophomoric to ask this question, but I think that there's a lot of women out there who are pivoting from government jobs. I've interviewed some when I worked in Big Four that wanted to get into Big Four, but didn't have that previous Big Four experience. And I think it's been, stifling for a lot of women who could potentially be strong fits for consulting, but they fear that inner narrative. And sometimes that's even championed by, again, recruiters that have never worked in the space who kind of want to shy women away because they don't fit this like athlete criteria or some of the criteria that's been taught to us, um, you know, while we've been recruiting. So just would love your thoughts on that.
You've said a couple of things that I wanted to address.
Sure.
One, I also have a personal story. I'm an immigrant. I moved as an adult um, from a very different culture. I came from Russia, and I had a really kind of budding career in Russia, but decided to move in 2009, which was not smart on my behalf. And it took me a little while, but I found a recruiting job that I was really overqualified for, but nobody else would hire me without the US experience. And it really was like, it wasn't great. It was not a great situation. And the manager there, when I was already working there for a couple of months, has come to me and said, I don't think you would ever fit in this country. I don't think you would ever achieve anything because of who you are. And I think it's important in this, to make it a larger point, right, from your story and my story. I think it's important to remember that one person's opinion does not define your future. There's always um, there's always an asshole that would bring you down because they want to lift themselves up
Yeah.
through you or by using you and pushing on you. Um, with the recruiters specifically, unfortunately, I keep reminding people the recruiters are people too.
Mm,
Would run into great recruiters the same way as you would run into great doctors. And you would run into shitty recruiters the same way you would run into doctors that are not great and um, might not know what they're doing or might not have the best bedside manner and so on and so forth, right?
mm.
It's just that we're interacting with recruiters so much that by sheer volume, the probability of meeting an asshole is
It's higher.
significantly higher.
Yeah.
Right.
But I think the broader point I was trying to highlight is that scares away a lot of qualified
It
women.
it does, yeah. And I was getting to that. And it's just a slow build up to the do not let the assholes ruin your confidence.
Yeah.
One of the things, and this is a little bit, let's come at it from a different angle. A lot of, so I am a career coach right now. I help people identify the jobs that they want and then go after them effectively, highlight their value proposition, interview effectively with confidence and clarity. And one of the things that I notice is that a lot of clients come to me with what is called away motivation, which is I don't want to be where I am anymore, but I have no idea where I want to be tomorrow, right? So I don't want to be here, but I don't know where I'm going. They have a vague idea, right? I was thinking about working at consulting, let's say, right? If we're dissecting this particular situation. I was thinking, but I don't think I'm a good fit, or I don't think I have the skills. Usually what it comes down to is that they don't really know what consulting is,
Mm,
and they have like a vague idea of like, well, I know someone who's successful and they are doing similar things, so I want to go try that. So if you're looking for a role, and you think you're going to be good at it, and you believe that you have the information about what that role entails, if you know that you can do it, then you can do it, right? We can talk ad nauseum about the flair and the branding and the specific firms and all of that stuff. But at the end of the day, the type of work that they do in different departments, it's very specific. It has very specific requirements. And if you realistically can say, yes, I don't know, I am a data scientist and I have worked within this specific organization, or I have the knowledge to complete this task realistically, then go for it. I have stories as a recruiter that I use a lot. Um, excuse me, of a math teacher that has gotten the education that she wanted and then became a consultant with no other work experience. I don't know what's happening with my voice. And other, we call it non-traditional backgrounds, right?
mm,
But the more you believe in yourself, the more of those kinds of people come in and try to interview, to have conversations, to apply, the more traditional it becomes.
yeah.
So,
You make an excellent point. I feel like when I was at supporting different areas internally at McKinsey, a lot of the recruiting leaders I met, I scratched my head and I was like, how did this person get in here? Right? Like they didn't have previous consulting experience. They came out of industry. They had just done very well in their own industry and then brought that experience to McKinsey or brought that into consulting. And I think that's really the biggest pivot is that it's not necessarily your background, it's how you've performed in your role and what you're bringing to the new employer or to you know how are you how are you describing what you're bringing to the table. And um I think that's the biggest takeaway I had from my experience is don't necessarily feed into the narratives. That's a huge theme for me throughout my newly launched podcast and coaching practice is that there's a lot of narratives out there that get in the way of confidence building and specifically women pushing themselves into roles that they aren't sure they'll actually get, right? I think there's a lot of statistics out there that say men will apply to 10 out of 10 roles, even if they have less than 5% of the qualifications, where women will only apply to roles where they have 10 out of 10 qualifications to meet. And I think that's the biggest misconception we have out there in the recruiting environment. And that's quite harmful for a lot of women who struggle to level up.
yeah, it's actually a couple of things there. So the meeting the requirements is one, and I really appreciated coming back to the DEI practices and departments that really were dedicated to thinking about it, I really value and appreciate what HubSpot did as a company, because I don't know if it still is the that way, but for several years they had a paragraph on all of their job descriptions that said, even if you do not match 100% of the requirements below, please apply. We would like to consider you.
Oh, yeah.
And and it was specifically done for based on the research for women that you're citing, that we tend to not apply for jobs that we are not matching 100%. There was another piece of research that said that men are hired on potential, women are hired on experience.
Yes, I've seen that in multiple places. Yeah, it's
But
true.
I think that's partially our fault, because in conversations and in interviews, we cannot sell potential. We don't, we don't present ourselves that way. We don't advertise our potential. Um, we even, and I agree with you on the coaching and reframing. Oftentimes we speak to women and they have done amazing things and they speak about it as if it's a Tuesday. And if you present it to the interviewer as if it's nothing special, they would hear nothing special. So it's a lot, it hinges a lot on the way that we talk about ourselves. And I think we shifted our focus a little bit more to the cultural perception and self-confidence. But yes.
Excellent, Maria. I want to dive in a little bit because I think we talked about something prior to the podcast that I think I don't want to forget about. And you're coming out with a new product. I believe it's a workbook. Do you want to tell us a little bit about your new product and a little bit more about what you're coming out with?
Sure. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity. So I am, as I mentioned, a career coach. And as a human being, as a person, I am very pragmatic and structured. I've done a lot of work on process optimization, and I enjoy it really tremendously to build systems that run smoothly, that work very effectively, and with minimum amount of friction. So as I started talking to my career coaching clients, I have noticed that a lot of them are asking very similar questions. Sort of like, you and I have statistics at hand, not because we know all of the statistics available, because these themes come up
Mhm.
so often that you kind of have to you start looking up the research, and you have it in your fingertips because it's so frequent. So I started noticing that a lot of questions that are coming up in my coaching sessions are pretty standard. You start with the goals, understanding where is it that you would like to go, instead of just, I want to get out of here. I don't want to be in my job anymore, but I don't know what my next step needs to be like, or I don't have a long-term goal. So started with that. Then we go into all of the direct collateral interview, I'm sorry, resume, LinkedIn, all of that stuff, formulating your messaging. Then inevitably, I like working with tech people. I speak nerd. We understand each other really well. So with tech people, inevitably they say, I hate networking. I don't understand what this is, what I need to do here. And I have a system that makes it really easy and way more targeted and structured, which makes it more comfortable for people that are used to that structure.
Mm.
Interview preparation, we do all of that work as what you and I have discussed just now, right? For both men and women that are struggling to reframe their value and present it effectively, and so on. So I realized that the steps are very similar in every conversation. The structure is very similar, and I tend to start to repeat my one-liners that live in my head. So I put it all into a workbook in that specific order. What are the exercises? And again, because I'm a pragmatic person, I really don't like when people tell me, well, you need to build a personal brand. And my first question always is how? You need to tell me how. What is it exactly that I need to do to achieve the goal that you're describing to me? So I've tried to put that thinking into my workbook, which is if it says you need to do this, then it has the exact steps that you need to go through with examples and explanations on what the outcome would be. So that is now a workbook
Hmm.
with space to write in your thoughts and reflections, and it is available on Amazon. And yes, the struggle of mispronouncing my last name everywhere and anywhere and everywhere lends me one cool benefit is that if you Google it, I am the only person.
The only one, huh?
The only one. If you go on LinkedIn, I am the only one. So
Well,
if you put my last name into Amazon, you will have the workbook. It is called From Stuck to Hired,
nice.
and it is a navy blue cover. There's several apparently books with that name, but only one Tselevich.
What we'll do, Maria, is we'll put a link on it. When I do publish
Abs
this episode, I'll put a link and make sure it's available for anyone after they've watched the podcast.
sure, absolutely.
Um,
Mhm.
I wanna pivot a little bit into the conversation of fairness. I think you and I had a really good conversation a few days ago where we were talking about the end of affirmative action, the end of diversity. I know we had a really tactful conversation. I don't know if you want to share any of your thoughts today to the audience and
Sure,
your opinion. I always like to say opinion and not have it represent anyone but yourself. How do you
absolutely.
feel? How do you feel about kind of like the state of recruiting and diversity and where we're going?
It's tough to say. I am, of course, deeply saddened by the changes that are happening, and not just in hiring, but overall in the country, and removal of a lot of support services and fairness guaranteeing services. Mhm. But there is hope. So some of the um, some of the thoughts that I started with a little earlier, right? Large companies, they do have that systematic approach of hiring based on skills.
Hmm.
And I think and I don't think enough of the smaller companies or um, enough of the companies in general put in effort into making it fair. Because at the end of day, at the end of the day, all of the DEI practices were implemented to make sure that everyone is allowed equal opportunity, right?
Right.
So providing support where support is needed to make sure that people have the seat at the table, people have the opportunity to interview to attain the job based on their merit, right? Not based on this is a great debate, right? The people that do not understand what DI is, that's their argument, right? Well, DEI hire, yes, because you still need to prove all of your, sometimes more, qualifications and skills and experience and so on. So my push right now, and a hill that I would die on, and a topic that I bring up in every conversation is that if you truly think about the effectiveness of your business, then hiring the best possible candidate is in favor and beneficial to your business. So then hiring the best possible candidate needs to hinge on the skills, the expertise, and the qualifications that that candidate has outside of any other demographic or any other criteria. So it starts with identifying what is it that you're actually interviewing for in those specific criteria. And if you're able to do that, then the next step is to make sure that your interviewing process reflects the requirements directly. And if you're able to create that system and then make sure that when you put people into it, they actually follow the instructions, then your business thrives. Then you hire the best possible person.
I agree. And I think a lot of organizations have adopted that, whether it's a mandate, a government mandate or not. I think people see that. Growing up, I grew up in Connecticut and I got my first job out of school was a General Electric. I worked at GE and I was really excited to see just from top layer down the amount of diversity. It gave me hope, it gave me energy to kind of keep pushing my career in a direction of progress. And I think a lot of people are afraid that we're seeing a reversal, a very large reversal of that, where we've fought so hard, and I don't want to just reference the civil rights movement, but I want to say within all the diversity, equity, and inclusion practices and programs that are out there to push the needle forward and do it in a very thoughtful way that was inclusive of everyone. It wasn't a way to target anyone, it was a way to include everyone. And I think that that's kind of the message that got missed along with this new reversal, is that diversity was kind of everyone's tool to get themselves in the door. It wasn't just for people of color, it was for the disabled, it was for the veterans, it was for really any marginalized community that didn't know how they were going to get themselves into an opportunity like a consulting firm. And so I'm a bit sad by what has happened. I think that's why I pushed myself into more social impact work and to get to work with the UN and to try to still make that difference. Even if I don't have the diversity hat on as a recruiter, I still feel like I'm making impactful work and making purpose-driven progress towards creating a better environment for us all. And I think that's the goal with the authentic discussion and with this podcast. And I thank you, Maria, for giving us a little bit of your time. And if you have any final thoughts, I'd love to hear that.
Sure. And I wanted to just confirm what you were just saying, right?
Sure.
It is very sad that the programs are shutting down and some of them have, and seemingly companies devaluing or deprioritizing that effort. But on the right side, and we can't really do anything about it, right? There's not under our control.
It's true. Yeah.
On the bright side, however, there are still people like yourself that are in positions where they can actually influence or affect the situation directly. And I think that there's still a lot of people for whom the fairness of the process is important and who still would champion um, initiatives or actions specifically that might not no longer be called, DEI specific, but would carry the same idea and the same effort to hire the best possible person. And as to the consulting firms, I think McKinsey specifically has done a lot of work to truly target the best people over the course of the last 30 years. And I don't think that's going to change because that's just who they are and how they hire because they just directly understand that a good candidate means more profit margins or whatever, the better outcome for the business.
Yeah.
So they would hire an alien if they demonstrated the skills that they're looking for. And then they have the skills down. Like they know exactly what you need to be doing to be successful. So I don't think that's this particular um, diminishing value of the DEI practices specifically would affect the way that large consulting companies hire.
Which I've seen that, and I've been, honestly very grateful that you came on the program, and just in general to see the commitments are still there. I think people are nervous though, right? We see thousands of layoffs happening on a weekly basis where companies,
Yeah, but that's a different side of that story, right?
but that
It's
is,
another whole podcast that you and I can
I
spin
know.
up.
True. I do want to say this last thought. I think people are afraid that that means because of the DEI reversal, companies are now trying to shed candidates that might fit that criteria. And I've been reading that, and I want to make sure that that's corrected. That narrative has been corrected. That that's not the case. It's just companies are not in a financial position to hire. It's not that they're just out there shedding diversity candidates. It's just most candidates are being let go, or most people are being let go because there are no budgets.
Anecdotally, and I have absolutely uh, no supportive data for this, but I have seen the opposite from the companies.
Okay.
So
Do you want to
maybe.
elaborate a little bit, Maria, or you're not?
No, it's just the conversations again, the not it's very small circle that I have direct visibility into.
Okay.
And I have just seen very different people being let go and
Hmm.
um,
Okay.
which does not support what you're saying. So
And
I also think that in terms of the volumes that are happening, it's very difficult to sh shed just the diversity and for better or for worse, there aren't that many.
no, and I agree with you. And I think that's there's been a lot of narratives out there, right?
I am really as again as a human, I mentioned this in the beginning. I
Yeah.
really dislike the way that a lot of our social media and media functions now because it over because of clickbait culture, it over indexes on negativity and fear mongering. So it is natural from a, you know, revenue for the media outlet effectiveness, but there is so much negativity in the infosphere that we're engaging with that it's really hard to stay critical and positive.
Well, and I also think
Mm.
people are looking for a way to politicize something that is just a cyclical recession, right? We have recessions all the time. I remember the one in 2008 that moved me from working in New York City to Boston, right? That's actually when I finally decided to come up to
Yeah.
Boston. And I came back down to New York City in 2019. And again, it was just a cyclical nature of the economy, right? And some companies, when they start to do well, they want to bring on as many strong and qualified candidates as they can. And then when they don't, everyone's leaving. It's not just one type of person, it's everyone. And I think I'm glad that we had a chance to address that. I'm a huge believer in course correcting and kind of unpacking stereotypes and kind of talking through narratives that sit with people. I've had a few friends who've been out of work for almost 2 years. Prior to starting my company, I was one of those people and I was quite nervous. And I think that there is a fear out there that, I'm not going to get a job because I used to be a diversity hire. And I'm glad that we were able to address that and clear that up because I think it's just as long as you're qualified and a strong fit for the opportunity, you have that chance like anyone else.
Absolutely. And no one can take away your skills. And
Exactly.
again, listen, it's, the situation you and I have described. There's always a person that might dislike you for whatever reason. They might dislike you because of the color of your skin, or they might dislike you because you're wearing, I don't know, shoes that they wanted and couldn't have,
Yeah.
or
You
something
never
else
know,
that
right?
came
Something
up.
that's out there.
Right. And to be even more kind of positive in this, that person might not even be aware of the reason why they dislike you. You inevitably will run into those people in your life. My grandma used to say, I'm not a silver ruble at that point for everyone to like me, right? We can say I'm not a silver dollar for everyone to like me.
Yeah, it's true. I think
And some of those people are in position of power, and yes, some of those people will have a moment where they can affect negatively or positively the outcome of the interviewing process or your life or your job search and so on. But that's inevitable for all of us. So
it's true. So keep
keep
powering
keep
forward.
keep going. You've got this. You've got this. Keep going.
Well, Maria, thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you on the podcast, and you definitely need to come back and keep us updated on how your workbook and some of the other projects that you have on your radar are going. And if you have any final thoughts, feel free to say them now. Otherwise, we can
No,
conclude.
I think we've covered a lot of things. Thank you so much for having me, Thalia, and I'm available whenever.
Okay.